Welcome to Yumi and All Things She. Our podcast is about all aspects of being a woman, from motherhood to careers, romantic relationships to family relationships and dynamics, and everything in between. It's a chance to learn, explore, and feel what's genuine and imagined as a woman in this world, along with multi-generational conversations that will stimulate your soul. So sit back, laugh, smile, and even cry a little along with us as we begin our journey together. You, me, and all things she. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Deb here with You, Me, and All Things She. And today we're going to talk about moving from stuck to unstoppable. And if you know me by now, we got to get to the definition to start, because what is the meaning of stuck really? Being stuck, per Webster's dictionary, is being unable to move from a particular position or place, or being unable to change a situation. And I know for most of us, women, men, it doesn't matter, that's not a very good feeling. And feeling stuck as a woman, I think we bring on a lot of that ourselves, which we'll dive into in this episode. So thank you so much for being here today. What causes that stuck feeling? It's not necessarily the stuck that we're going to talk about. A good part of this episode is going to be talking about the feelings that are involved with that stuck concept. So many times we talk about the fear of failure, and this is a fear I think that many people have, but it can be especially paralyzing for us as women because of all of the social things that are happening out there in the world. You know, for a long time in my lifetime, it was talked about this men versus women in careers. And we always knew as women, we weren't probably ever going to get to, from an income standpoint or possibly even a position standpoint, the same level that maybe a male person in that same role might get to. And that doesn't exist today. However, I know we talked about this in a previous episode. I think that the social aspect of all of the social platforms are out there, that's causing for us as women, we tend to look at other women differently. We'll talk about in one entire episode how we scale ourselves to other women that we see, whether it's in our neighborhood, other mothers, other people in a very similar life situation, and we start to compare whether or not we have achieved success in a family dynamic or career dynamic. And so many times we'll get stuck in that feeling of failure. I think just as important as that is that we may not realize it, or you may not realize it, is the fear of success. If you've had successful people in your life, I was talking to a family member the other day, and they were saying, well, I've just had the experience of watching how money has changed people in their environment. And as we begin to walk through that, I go, really? That's kind of interesting, because I shared my belief. Well, I believe that money just makes the core of a person come out even stronger. And if you're a giver, you're going to be more of a giver. If you're not, you're not. And so it will just simply emphasize what is or truly isn't for a person. And after we got through with that conversation, they started to change their view, at least on our conversation, about their beliefs of that. So I think even the fear of success, what happens if we do become more than what we ever anticipated? And so we keep that stuck feeling alive because we live in that fearful place. And we'll talk about that term fear a little bit later in this episode. So hang tight, stay with me, because another area that we as women can feel ourselves stuck or find feeling stuck is when there's that lack of self-confidence. I know even in my own personal career, if I'm talking about what I have been trained and educated on, for an example, I can talk confidently about that all day long. But when I'm starting to learn something new, I become less confident about it. Therefore, now I begin to, and then I start to get into this next step of it, which is that imposter syndrome. How am I to talk about something that I'm not as knowledgeable about? And so then we start to question our own confidence, our own abilities of whether or not to even talk about something or feel something. Then we start to question whether or not we can even feel the way we want to feel or feel comfortable talking about it in order to learn more. We don't necessarily believe in ourselves. And if we feel that from someone else on the outside, sometimes that feeling of inadequacy and lack of confidence then just compounds itself. And I know for me, I tend to take some of those outside feelings on more maybe than I should. And it's because I care about the people in my life. And if they have a particular feeling or opinion, I find value in that. And so oftentimes I will seek their thoughts and ideas where maybe I need to have a little bit more self-confidence in order to not rely on that feedback, even if it's less than positive. So, finding that self-confidence or doing what we need to in order to be confident in a particular topic. When I'm at that place sometimes of overwhelm, I know in our particular family, we sometimes will call that in a hangry place because we're hungry and angry and maybe even tired along with it. But when we're in that overwhelmed space, sometimes we as women get to feeling stuck just because there's way too much going on and I can't seem to manage it. So rather than taking a step back and possibly taking a breath and working through it, we get to this overwhelmed spot and then we just shut down. We feel stuck. I cannot see a way out of this, or I can't even begin to take one step forward. And that's what this whole episode was about, is not feeling in that stuck. We have to identify it before we can begin to move forward. But then how do we collectively as a group work together to really get each other on board and pull each other up? Those memes on all of those social media platforms where you're watching someone pull someone up from the side of the mountain. That's what I feel sometimes we as women need to be there, is the rescue for one another, just the handout to say, you know what, I understand what you're going through and what can I do to help? And I've really tried to take that approach in many of the newer relationships that I've been developing with other women in my network. And it's just been amazing that how receptive others are to just, what can I do to help you? And what can I do to support you? And is there anything I can do? And I just had someone reach out to me yesterday asking a specific question. Are you familiar with this? And is there anything that you can glean to help me out? And we just had this, text conversation back and forth. And I said, please just keep me informed, because when you find out, guess what? That's going to help me as well. And I'll be more informed the next time. So it's just us partnering together and having each other's back when the tough times come and when we're in that stuck position, because I know what she was feeling at the moment is just really stuck with that situation. Many times we just don't know what we want. And that can feel stuck. Many times when we have been in our careers at a place where we were pivoting or shifting, and I go, I just don't know. I told you the story the last episode about when, I was going to be teaching motorcycling, and I just felt stuck in that decision process. I felt stuck in my own world, in my own mind about where to go, what to do, and how to get out of that. But I had to almost, like a meat before dinner, I had to marinate in that. I had to sit with that a little bit. Had to figure things out on my own before I could really break out of my shell and go, aha, here is exactly what I want to be doing, or here's how I can become unstuck. And there were several steps in that journey where I had to break through the stuckness, which we talked about in that last episode. And I know that you can be there too. We'll talk about those small steps, because I not too long ago had another situation similar to that. I was feeling stuck, and I'll explain that as we move forward. But I had to break out of that. I had to find a way to take one step forward that just all of a sudden opened doors, which I had never even imagined would happen. So some external factors that we need to consider is sometimes we get stuck for the external factors kind of beyond our control, when things like financial constraints come about, or all of a sudden cash flow changes. Possibly it could be things like, family dynamic or family support. Maybe you've had family around to be there to support you and guide you, and all of a sudden they make a life change and they're no longer present. Or, they were a stay-at-home mom and now they're working and they're not so available any longer. Those are the things that, might shift in our outside world that now all of a sudden I go, I don't know who to go to. I don't know who to reach out to. But it has been amazing through this journey of the podcast, even so far, that so many have reached out and said, you know what, I'm here, or this is what I'm going through, or this is what I've experienced. And that's exactly why I wanted to create the podcast to begin with, is a way for us as women to connect in a whole different way that's just there to support each other. But if you're feeling stuck, it's important to remember that you're not alone. I know I have felt it over the years, many different times, many different ways, lots of different reasons and things that are causing that stuck feeling. And sometimes just knowing that we're not alone can free things up like you never knew existed before. So if not, reach out to someone. Join our Facebook group and connect with other women. I'm going through this. Chances are that there are probably other women out there that you can connect with that go, this is how I kind of got unstuck, or this is how I worked through that situation. So be sure to go out and find the You, Me, and All Things She Facebook group and connect with other women. That's what we're all here for. And if you felt the same way, guess what? Now you can be a resource for others. And I know personally, it feels so wonderful to be able to extend that hand and reach out and help someone else that is just in that tough spot. If it's been going on for a period of time, you may need to reach out to a therapist or some other support group. If you're in some sort of recovery, you may also want to consider possibly reading some self-help books or, maybe some confidence books. I've done that from time to time. I just need a little boost. And I read about this woman motorcyclist that's done these big things. And I go, okay, you know what? That's great. I can do that too. And it just shifts my paradigm of what I think I am or who I am and takes me out of that place. And we'll talk about lots of different ways to do that. But if you're feeling stuck or unfulfilled, that's not just where it ends, because there's so much more that comes along with it. I know we've talked about anxiety and that feeling stuck. And that can bring anxiety, that stuck feeling. Just not only do you feel that lack of confidence, and then when you're placed in a situation, maybe you're around people for the first time or people that you haven't met before, and that just creates this anxious anxiety inside of you. And maybe you need some help working through that. Maybe there are techniques that you can learn through meditation that will help deal with some of that nervousness. Or, through the meditation cycle, you can work on some of that self-discovery of thinking differently, changing how that impacts you. Maybe reliving or understanding the signs and symptoms when that anxiety is beginning to happen rather than when it's full on an anxiety or panic attack. Also, it can cause health problems. So feeling stuck can lead to our physical health. It can lead to intestinal issues and stomach issues. And all of a sudden, what you used to eat is now causing you heartburn. It can also cause you to feel, lethargic. And now you don't want to move, which then that feeling stuck turns into unhealthy actions. And so, it can do things like you can read journals about it. It can cause heart disease. It can cause high blood pressure. It can cause, when we get to those unhealthy habits, of not even wanting to get up and go for a walk or do something, all of a sudden we're attracted to that unhealthy eating habit of sugar and sweets and all of those other things. And then all of a sudden now we get the weight coming on, and that changes that whole dynamic. So it can be this big snowball effect if we don't kind of be aware of it, watch for it, because it's going to happen. And then what are we going to do to overcome it? Because ultimately you will, and learn how to and become an overcomer. I was listening to that song just this morning by Mandisa, and I love that. So it can cause relationship problems. There are times when we feel stuck if we don't feel like we can really talk to a significant other in our relationship. Maybe we feel like we're going to be judged by them. There are times in our relationship, in my marriage, when I've had to say, I just need you to listen. I just need to bounce this off of someone. I need to get it out. So please just listen. And they love you. They're trying to, and oftentimes that other person knows you better than you know yourself. And they maybe can help you pull that out. But there are times when I don't want that help. I just want someone to listen. And so being a good communicator will help to, bridge that gap and just let you maybe vent. And the unfortunate news is that sometimes we vent to people and we rely on that person to be our vent. So we have to watch that in balance as well, making sure that we're not constantly bending a friend's ear all the time about all the problems, because then that can become a heavy burden for them too. And they don't deserve that. They need to be a friend when the times are good, and they need to be a friend when times are tough. And that's what the relationship begins to develop and strengthen. So whether you're in a relationship with someone else, a partnership, a marriage, they're there for you. They love you. And there are times when we just need to communicate back to them really what we need at this moment. We have to pause. We have to take that time to figure that out, because if not, that could create more of that confusion. If they just say the wrong word when we're in that stuck place, all of a sudden now we're going, you're right. I am stuck and I'm right here and you're right. And I feel even worse than I did when we started to talk. And as that begins to develop, then you know what, we get caught into that trap of low self-esteem. When we feel stuck, it can be easy to start believing that we're not good enough, that I don't have what it takes. You know, if you're out there in the job market right now looking for a position, I know that it's a tough market. It's tough to get one phone call back. It's just crazy. So then we start to question ourselves, well, do I really have the skills that I thought I have? And do I have the ability to offer what an employer might be looking for? Even though you've done that same exact role for years, now we begin to question, which leads to low self-esteem. And then that leads to more feelings of worthlessness and just kind of brings us into this possible dark abyss that now is even more difficult to try and get out of. But I like this saying by Beyonce, is that I don't like to gamble, but if there's one thing I'm willing to bet on, it's myself. And if you can take some of those quotes and or affirmations that we're talking about in these podcasts, just that one, I call them a mantra sometimes, because when I was doing some heavy duty training for running, the one thing that I would tell myself when I got to that place where I just wanted to kind of quit in the middle is that if this was easy, everyone would be doing it. And that was a mantra that I had to tell myself running all the time. And so sometimes I like to just get that quote stuck in my brain and go, I've got to be willing to bet on myself. So rather than talking about all the things that lead to us being stuck, now it's time to shift gears and move into this unstoppable place. And so how in the world does that happen? It can begin by setting one small, achievable goal when you feel overwhelmed. Recently, as crazy as this was, I had been postponing cleaning my tile floors. And so what has started to happen over a period of time is now it's on my list. I've got to get it done. I started to feel bad and negatively because I wasn't getting it done. And I just said, you know what? Today I'm getting up and I'm getting the floor done. And this is silly, but I felt so accomplished and so much better about myself and about my day because I actually got it done, and I am so super excited. And those are just the small little things. Set one small goal. Today I'm going to, maybe if you're not making the bed at the moment, maybe you're going to pull the sheets up and make the bed. It's not huge, it's not monumental, but it is that small achievable goal which will begin to turn the tides of this, getting unstuck from things. And maybe that's a new habit that you want to start on a more regular basis. And we'll talk about habits here in a little bit, but taking that action, even if it's small, sometimes can be the hardest first step. Just doing it once, and then you have to do it again and take a second step to continue to build that progression to become unstuck. But that first step oftentimes is the hardest. I know when they talk about, exercising and working out, that if you stop for a period of time, the most difficult thing is to get started again. Well, that's absolutely true. And becoming unstuck, it can be that most difficult place, is that very first step. But we have to be sure that we're not afraid to ask for help if we need it. There are lots of people, I'm sure, around you that care about you. And even when you're in that unstuck place and it feels like there's no one that understands, there's no one that's been here before, even if you connect to our group or you leave a comment in the video and let me know, hey, I'm feeling this way, I need to chat, you know what, we'll pick up the phone if we need to. We'll communicate, we'll do emailing, whatever. Even if you just needed to rant and rave on an email and send it, by all means, get it out. But don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it, because most oftentimes there are a ton of people that are willing to help you. They just don't know how. And I know my approach, especially with, grown daughters, is I don't want to be a burden. So therefore, I'm not going to force my help in a way. There comes a pivoting point in that relationship when we're now adult friends rather than parent-child relationship. And I'm not going to force my will on them. I'm not going to show up unexpectedly and expect them to open arms, be ready for me. So we're going to have these healthy boundaries that say, if you need help, you just need to simply reach out and ask. And if I need your help, I'll do the same. That's how we have this open communication and open relationship to be there for one another. And then we also have to be sure that we celebrate our successes, no matter how small. I was celebrating the floor the other day and I was like, don't touch it. Don't, that was my celebration. I was just relishing in the fact that I did finally achieve that one small goal. Another goal that I had recently had is I have been wanting to for years and years is to give back my time to helping a local abuse shelter and recovery center for women. And so I finally just picked up the phone. I sent an email. I didn't pick up the phone. And I did pick up the phone first. I said, I'm interested in possibly volunteering. Can you help guide me? And they said, sure, we'll need you to go to the website. They sent me to someone's voicemail. And I just started that process. And the most scariest thing ever was the first day. They said, well, we could use your help here in this area. And so I said, okay, great. And I scheduled a time with someone to show up and help them. But that was scary. I was nervous. I was anxious to really begin to help others. And I kind of had to put that in perspective in my mind and go, you know what? It took a lot of courage, first of all, just to reach out. So celebrate that. You did that. And now it takes just as much courage to show up the first day. But what they're relying on you to do is to be there to help. And that's all I needed to do, was just to be there, open arms, and willing to help. And I did. It was amazing. I met a bunch of really awesome women that are there helping as well. And I'm just moving forward with other areas of volunteering in that organization. And so it was just that one step, but it was so scary. And I felt so anxious. And I remember sitting in my car before I went in that very first morning, and the butterflies are floating. And I'm like, what is this all about? Why am I anxious? Why am I nervous about helping others when it was something that I feel has been drawn to do? I've been drawn to do. And I just finally took a step of faith and did it. And it feels wonderful. So, and I'm just now excited to see kind of how that relationship with that organization unfolds and how I can even be of more service than what I was able to do that first time, or, another time or two that I'll do before I move into another area. But this quote from Oprah Winfrey I thought was fabulous. It says, think like a queen. Think about that. Think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is only another stepping stone to greatness. And if we don't take action, if we don't take a step, first of all, there's no option to win or lose or fail or not fail or succeed. So we have to be willing to take the courage to even take that first step. And if there's failure, guess what? I look back at that. There's my self-discovery. I go, so what didn't work well? What did I not do perfectly or well enough, good enough to then be successful? And that's that failure. And then what am I going to do differently moving forward? So it's that self-discovery time if we don't necessarily succeed every time. I recently saw this definition of fear, and I've heard, lots of different acronyms of fear all spelled out in lots of different ways. But this one I thought was perfect for us in our talk today. But fear, face everything and rise. I'll say that again. Fear, face everything and rise. If we don't face it, and that's anything and everything, we can't rise through it. We can't decide whether or not it's a match or not a match. We can't decide whether or not I enjoy this or I don't enjoy this, or how can I help others. We'll stay in that stuck place. So if we face everything and rise, we'll be able to determine whether or not how we can get through that unstuck space. So wrapping things up, we're going to talk about our 3 steps to facing your fears so that you can rise and move from stuck to unstoppable. First, we need to acknowledge our fears. The first step to move forward is saying, you know what, I am feeling stuck and it's not good. It's yucky. Maybe I need to find a way to get through that. And that's what this is all about. But it's okay to feel stuck. And it's important that we allow ourselves to feel whatever emotions, whether it's sadness for being there or feeling that way. We cannot move forward until we have acknowledged what we're feeling, because if you've ever heard the saying, thoughts lead to feelings and feelings lead to actions, that's exactly what we're going through this process for now, is that we need to be able to resonate. I need to feel that feeling before I can even begin to change my thinking, which will change my feelings in order to move forward. So this may take some time to formulate what you're feeling and begin moving beyond it. It's easy to say, I'm just frustrated or I'm mad or, but why? And we'll get to that here in a moment. But one step you can take to really discovering what those feelings are is in your journal or on a piece of paper, simply draw a line down the middle of that paper. And here's what the task is. if you are so inclined. But on the left-hand side, we're going to write the words that are describing those feelings that we're feeling, whether it's lonely, afraid, sad, angry. And then on the other side of that line in the middle of the paper, we're going to write those feelings that we aspire to change them into. So an example, if you're feeling lonely, maybe I'm inspiring to feel cared for by others, or, attention is given by my spouse. And maybe we just need to communicate that. I want to feel excited. I want to feel joyful, and so on. So we're taking what we're feeling now and we're becoming aware of what we're feeling, and also becoming aware of what we want to turn that feeling into. So it's kind of just that beginning step of, here's really where I am, but ultimately here's the vision of where I want to go. The second step is to identify the source of your stuckness. So now we feel it. We felt it. We know we want to come from this feeling to this feeling. And then, so what are we going to do to become unstuck? And once you acknowledge your feelings, then you can simply identify the source of that stuckness. Maybe it is we're not communicating, because I know we can very easily draw back from communication with our significant other. And all of a sudden we wonder why communication's bad. Well, it's because we're not sharing either. We're not talking. And that adds to that stuckness. But what's holding you back? Are there any specific fears or beliefs that are preventing you from possibly moving forward or doing something that you want to do? Are we keeping our own selves in this stuck space? And oftentimes, kind of back to that personal responsibility episode, yes, we can. We can keep ourselves right there in that stuck space. So over the past 10 years, I have relied more strongly on what's referred to as my astrological birth chart, to help me become a little bit more aware of what I'm dealing with, who I am, and becoming knowledgeable about what makes me tick. Now, this is not the astrological charts that you read in the newspapers, or you go to Facebook, or you're getting a daily astrological reading. It's nothing like that. So let me just share a little bit more about that. The planets are what the planets are, and I believe that they're all part of God's plan. But what those planets do for me is they tell me a little bit more about who I am, because the planets were aligned in a certain place on the date and time that I was born, in the location I was born. And so that for me is very specific to who I am. Although many of us have the same sign, so to speak, it's significantly different for everybody. We're all uniquely different. So one conflict for me is that I enjoy people and serving them. And what I've discovered through learning from tools that I've used as I've become more connected with my astrological birth chart is that sometimes could be a downfall for me. I can rely on others more than I give credit to myself. So I need to feel the feelings I feel and become knowledgeable about that. And then sometimes why I'm stuck is because I'm trying to make others feel happy, or I'm trying to make others feel a certain way, or view me in a certain light. So by becoming connected with me, I go, okay, that's right. That's who I am. And that's what I'm doing. And that's making me feel stuck. So if I just take a little bit of personal responsibility and step out in this way, then maybe I'll feel unstuck. And that's what I did with that whole volunteering, is I just took one step because I wanted to give to others in a different way. It's something that had been on my heart for a long, long time. And I finally took the leap of faith. So I use those planets as a tool in my toolbox to help me in lots of different ways, with relationships, with, family relationships, learning about others in the family and why they may be coming from this style of communication, or, why they may be thinking and feeling the way they do, because their birth chart is significantly different than mine. And so if I can help you with that, by all means, if you'd like to learn more about your astrological birth chart, just simply let me know. Put a comment in below. There are ways to contact me. I'll have my email address in there as well. So simply reach out. I'll be happy to do a reading with you on your birth chart. And we can find possibly where that your stuckness is, and maybe the tools that are helping you, or relationships that are a struggle for you. Maybe some of the aha moments will come through us talking together about your astrological birth chart. So just simply reach out and let me know. If it's not for you, then another tool or technique you can do for really getting to the root of your stuckness and moving beyond that is journaling on another piece of paper. It's not maybe necessarily time to really look at those feelings any longer. Now it's time to brainstorm on that piece of paper of what you're going to do to commit to moving forward. Maybe it's taking action. And I use this kind of as a brainstorming, as just this blank piece of paper. In what ways can I do things different? An example might be that the last child was starting school, so loss of a job, that, feeling kind of that empty nest during the day if you were a stay-at-home mom. Those might be the things that are causing you to feel stuck. Well, what can I do? Maybe you can go volunteer in the mornings. As soon as they go to school, guess what? You take and busy yourself with giving back to a cause that's meaningful to you. Maybe it's a loss of a job. We'll talk more about that in other episodes moving forward. Or a relationship maybe is ended, or, not finding work, and we start to beat ourselves up, as I mentioned. But it comes down to that personal responsibility piece that we talked about in a previous episode. And if you need to revisit that episode, by all means, it's there for you to listen to and really digest and work through it. But step number 3 is, now we've got a formulated plan. Now we've felt our feelings. We know what we want to convert those feelings to. Now it's time to take action. That final step is to take action, even if it's the smallest little step forward out of that stuckness. Now is the time to take that action. It doesn't mean that you have to do everything that you figured out. It doesn't mean you have to have this entire plan unveiled. It's just one small, simple step. And it's amazing as you take one small step, how other things begin to unfold. You meet someone that you never met before, and guess what? They have maybe the same interest that you have. And now maybe they've got children the same age, and now you can connect and do play dates for the kids. So it can grow and blossom into something that you probably never, ever imagined. One way to do that is on a piece of paper. For this final step, you're simply going to write what things you're going to do to take action. An example may be volunteering for an organization. It may be helping a next door neighbor out that's in need. It might be starting a small exercise program, like walking 2 or 3 days a week. And it doesn't have to be far. When I first started getting back into running, which I'm still kind of in that getting back into running, I'm running a very small 1/4-mile lap around my neighborhood. That's it. I'm not taking these huge leaps of faith. I'm just taking small baby steps to begin to work toward that. But start it in the next few days. The sooner you start, the sooner you'll start to pull yourself and feel out of that unstuck feeling. So now you're going to become that superstar. Add that list to your affirmations, though, from the earlier podcast. Be sure to write down on your schedule, or put it, things that I need to do to hold myself accountable and make sure that I do take that action. Is I'll put it on my digital calendar. I'll put it on my paper calendar. I'll write my workout schedule every week on every day that I'm going to do something. But it's important because it takes 21 days to change a habit. If you don't start, you can't really move toward that 21-day process. And before you know it, you'll be doing it like it's nothing any longer. So my challenge to you is dare to do something that will make you stretch a little bit further today than maybe you have in the past. So get out of your comfort zone. This particular quote, don't do something uncomfortable today by stepping out of your box. You don't have to settle for what you are. The cool thing is that you get to create who you want to become. And that was by Harold Wallstein. I love that quote. Do something uncomfortable today by stepping out of your box. You don't have to settle for what you are. You get to create who you want to become. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And moving forward, you do not want to miss next week's episode, because we're going to talk about mental toughness. Talked a little bit about feelings today and how to get out of those unstuck feelings. But next week, we are going to power pack our talk on mental toughness, and you do not want to miss that. Until then, we'll see you next week. Have a great one. Please let me know if I can help in any which way, leaving a message, or feel free to email me. Until next time.